Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into sandals older than most empires and strolling straight into a time when one misplaced bowl could bring down an entire dynasty. No pressure. The year is, well, vague, somewhere around the 11th century BCE, give or take a few rainy seasons. The Western Zhou dynasty is fresh-faced and full of confidence. The kings here like their rituals strict, their ancestors properly appeased, and their bronze vessels highly polished. Especially one in particular. You're standing at the edge of a low hilltop court where the grass smells of rain and soot. Below you, the rooftops of Zhou nobility stretch out like neat paper folds, arranged to appease both Feng and Shui. Mist curls from morning fires, nothing dramatic. Just slow, smoky breaths rising from kitchen hearths and ancestral altars. You probably wouldn't survive here long. Not because it's especially brutal, though, fair warning, sanitation is still just a rumor, but because your modern instincts are all wrong. The moment you make a joke about the bowl, or touch it with unritualized fingers, or sneeze near an altar, someone would absolutely report you to the nearest elder with a fan and a long memory. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are? I always love seeing the sleepy little constellation we create. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're sent to the court as a quiet guest, more like honored observer than decision maker, which is just fine with you. There's a thick, lovely silence here. Even the birds seem hesitant to squawk before the ancestors have had their wine. The court is open air, draped in gauze-colored cloth that stirs softly with the wind. In its center stands a plinth of blackened stone, and on top of that, resting like the world's most judgmental centerpiece, is the bowl. It doesn't look all that special at first glance. Bronze, shallow, 3 sturdy legs with spiraling touty patterns that glare like very unimpressed owls. But the closer you get, the more your eyes catch subtle flourishes. A gilded rim etched with clouds, little teeth-like nicks around the base, probably not from mice, and an inscription inside that reads something like "Heaven listens where bronze speaks." No big deal, just an object meant to carry words to the gods. Everyone treats the bowl like it might explode or worse, talk. It is cleaned daily by a priest with fingers like twigs. It is lifted only with cloth-gloved hands, like a cranky relative in a porcelain mood. During ceremonies, it receives wine first, food second, and prayers third. The king doesn't even get that level of respect from his own cousins. As you shuffle closer, you can feel it, the weight of the bowl. Not literal, it's maybe 5 pounds on a good humidity day, but it presses on the space around it like a story that's already gotten too big. You ask the steward, a man named Yu with hair as flat as his tone, what's it for exactly? He doesn't even blink. Balance, he says. You wait for more, you don't get more. Later, you find out that this bowl is used only during the great rite of spring, the once-a-year ritual meant to confirm the king's mandate, not the metaphorical kind, the actual mandate of heaven. You know, the thing that lets someone rule without getting smacked by lightning or invaded by every cousin with a grudge. So yes, it matters. And this year, the bowl seems shinier than usual. People whisper about how the bronze gleamed too brightly at last week's moonrise. Some say that's a good omen. Others think it means the gods are bored. One girl whispered that a shadow crossed it yesterday at noon, which apparently hasn't happened since a goose stole the king's seal 2 generations ago. That might have been a metaphor, or not. Either way, people are nervous, and when people get nervous in the Zhou court, they make offerings, or accusations. You get the sense something is brewing. Not in the political theater way, but in the someone's about to blame the weather on the king kind of way. That night, As you lie in your guest chamber on a mat that smells faintly of bamboo and soot, you hear something strange. Not drums, not bells, just a thud, followed by a very soft shuffle. You sit up, but the courtyard is still, peaceful, wrapped in clouds and moonlight. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just the wind brushing the curtains. Or maybe, maybe, the bowl has decided it doesn't want to wait for the ceremony. Morning in the Western Zhou court comes not with a bang, but with the cautious rhythm of sweeping brooms and low muttered greetings. It's the kind of dawn that stretches out like a cat, slow, full of pauses and very aware of itself. You step back into the open-air courtyard with sleep still clinging to your face like rice paper. The bowl should be there, perched on its usual plinth, doing its usual sacred stare-down of the mortal realm. It isn't. Instead, there's a suspicious amount of empty space, the kind of space people carefully pretend not to see. The priests arrive late. That alone is a red flag. One of them is still chewing, which may be a violation of 17 different ceremonial edicts. The others avoid eye contact with the plinth like it might throw accusations. You walk slowly around the space. The pedestal is cold to the touch. The indent where the bowl sat has a faint green ring, evidence of long use, not recent cleaning. There are no scratches, no overturned vases, just the peculiar quiet of people who haven't decided how panicked they should be yet. And then comes the steward. You, same limp sash, same indifferent eyebrows, but his mouth is just slightly too tight this morning. Not that most would notice. But you, now mildly suspicious and under-caffeinated, definitely do. The bowl is being polished, he says without being asked. You raise one eyebrow. It needed realignment. That's not a thing, at least not for bowls. The high priest arrives next, a man with sleeves longer than his legs and a voice like boiled vinegar. He glances at the pedestal and blinks only once. Impressive composure. Begin the rite, he says. But the bowl, someone starts. The gods know, he replies, as if that solves the minor issue of a missing celestial transmission device. And that's how the ritual proceeds, with fruit offerings, rhythmically timed bell chimes, and a very conspicuous lack of bowl. Which brings us to the obvious historical fact. Ritual bronzes in the Western Zhou weren't just ceremonial, they were political artifacts. Possession of certain shapes or types signified legitimacy, lineage, or divine favor. You couldn't just swap one out for a cereal bowl and hope heaven didn't notice. The problem isn't just that the bowl is missing, it's that it's this bowl, the one used in the annual rite to confirm the king's mandate. Without it, the ceremony is incomplete, and an incomplete ceremony suggests that heaven's ear wasn't bent in the right direction, which could mean that heaven isn't listening. Or worse, it is listening, and it doesn't like what it hears. Historians still debate how literal this all was. Did the people really believe the bronze carried voices skyward? Or was it all metaphor and tradition, a political theater dressed in incense and lacquered robes? Either way, no one dares to speak of it openly. But that doesn't stop the whispers. In the Hall of Ancestral Names, lined with carved tablets bearing the names of the dead, there's a low hum of half-sentences and side glances. Someone says they saw you in the storage rooms last night, alone. Someone else claims the bowl hasn't been polished in years. It's self-blessed, a term which definitely sounds made up. One young noble mutters that the bowl vanished once before, during the reign of a particularly unlucky king who later got kicked off his horse by a goose. Again with the geese. They're either messengers of doom or extremely underappreciated villains in Zhou lore. A more practical concern emerges too. Without the bowl, the king's legitimacy can be questioned. Not today, maybe, but soon. And not loudly, but with the subtle erosion of trust that dynasties find hard to fix once the rot sets in. You wander through the murmurs, listening, not speaking. You weren't supposed to notice this. You're an outsider, an observer. But now the air around you feels different, like the gods might start asking you questions if no one else will. At one point, you find yourself standing beside an old mural. It shows the first Zhou king presenting a bronze bowl to heaven, arms outstretched, robes billowing like dramatic clouds. You try to read the inscription beneath it, but it's been scratched away, not fully, just enough to make you wonder. As you leave the hall, you hear one final whisper. If heaven does not receive its drink, the speaker doesn't finish the sentence. They don't need to. You walk outside, the wind's picked up. You look at the sky, and for just a moment, it looks like the clouds are watching you. You don't mean to eavesdrop, truly. But when a man with cracked fingernails, a limping sandal, and an oversized key ring mumbles to himself while walking in circles, well, you listen. It's practically required. The steward, Yu, has been circling the outer garden for the better part of an hour. You're fairly sure he passed the same shrub 3 times, each time whispering something about wax seals and nobody dusting the pedestal properly. He doesn't see you. Or if he does, he assumes you're part of the landscape. A pot, perhaps, or a quiet plant. You trail him from a polite distance. You aren't sure why. Maybe it's boredom. Maybe it's the bowl's sudden celebrity status. Or maybe it's the fact that Yu looks like a man trying to return something before anyone notices it's gone. He disappears into a side building, not one you've been inside yet. The sign over the door is a faded carving, 2 symbols, one for storehouse, the other for prayers. Which, frankly, sounds like a dangerous combination. You wait a beat, then follow. The air inside smells of dust, beeswax, and misfiled regrets. Scrolls line the walls like sleeping moths. Small altar cloths are folded in uneven piles. And in the corner stands Yu, staring at an empty pedestal identical to the one in the courtyard. You clear your throat softly. He jumps, not in fear exactly, but in the way someone jumps when caught mid-sneeze with their hand in a honey jar. Ah. He says, composing himself. Didn't hear you, very echoey in here. You nod, eyes flicking to the pedestal. That's the practice one, he adds, far too quickly. For rehearsal ceremonies. The real bowl would never be kept here. You raise an eyebrow. He looks away, then he says something odd. Maybe it's tired of the rites, he mumbles, running a finger along the empty circle. Tired of all the same wine, same prayers. Maybe it wanted a different view. You blink. The bowl left, he stiffens. Of course not, that would be ridiculous, completely ridiculous. But there's something in his voice. Not guilt exactly, not fear either, more like nostalgia. You remember a small detail someone mentioned in passing yesterday. You wasn't just any steward, he's been here the longest. He once served the king's father, back when the bowl was first cast. He used to polish it himself, back when the bowl was new and the dynasty still glowed with youthful arrogance. And it hits you, Yu misses the old days, the order of things. Before the king started holding shorter rituals and skipping formal meals to read military reports. Before the offerings became more show than spirit. Maybe the bowl didn't vanish for chaos, maybe it vanished for memory. Historically, we know that Western Zhou ceremonial roles were deeply tied to personal identity. Losing access to one's duty could be like losing a name. Ritual specialists weren't just assistants, they were spiritual custodians. Their connection to sacred objects could be intense, sometimes obsessive. You glance at Yu again. He's dusting the pedestal now, as if by habit. Did you see it last? You ask, gently. He doesn't answer. Instead, he tells you a story, one you didn't ask for, but listened to anyway. Once, he says, a goose flew into the temple of ancestral favor, landed right in the middle of the ceremony. Everyone panicked. The king froze. The priest started shouting, but the bowl didn't move. It just sat there. Steady, glowing, even. You wait for the point. I always thought, Yu adds, that it knew something we didn't, that it held the history better than we ever could. You wait, then he blinks, like waking up from a nap. But I wouldn't know where it is, he finishes, suddenly formal. Haven't seen it. Haven't touched it, wouldn't dream of it. You thank him, back away, out into the sun again. The bowl may be missing. But your first suspect isn't. He's right there, tending to an empty pedestal and talking to ghosts. Historians still wonder how much personal devotion shaped the rituals of this time. Was it belief, fear, habit, or something stranger like love you don't know yet? But you do know that whatever this is, it's more than theft, it's personal. You don't even hear the bells at first. You feel them, low, metallic pulses that hum through the soles of your feet like distant thunder wrapped in silk. The morning ceremony has begun again, only this time it's louder than usual. Not in volume, but in tension. Like everyone's trying a bit too hard to pretend nothing's wrong, you drift toward the main hall. And there, beneath gauzy banners and a ceiling crowded with carved dragons, is the king. He's seated on a raised dais of polished wood, draped in soft russet and forest green robes, eyes half-lidded like he's been awake since the ancestors were teens. Beside him, the high priest mutters a chant, voice so dry it could sand furniture. There are all the usual trappings of ritual. Incense curling like lazy thoughts, attendants pouring wine with extreme caution, and musicians plucking one string every 30 seconds in what may or may not be an actual melody. The only thing missing is the bronze bowl in its place. A slightly smaller vessel, hastily elevated on a cushion and flanked by two very nervous acolytes pretending not to tremble. You glance around, no one says a word, but everyone is watching. Everyone knows the bowl is gone. The substitute looks like it was pulled from someone's pantry. The kind of vessel used to serve congee to underwhelming guests. Not exactly the image of celestial authority, and that's when you realize, it's not just the object people care about, it's what it represents. This bowl has been part of every major rite for decades. Generations, maybe. To remove it, even temporarily, isn't just an inconvenience. It's an interruption in the flow of mandate and memory. If the gods are keeping score, this is a dropped pass in a sacred game. The king keeps his face impassive. A masterclass in I'm not panicking. But the flicker in his left thumb, tapping, just barely betrays him. You watch as the ritual continues. A cockerel is offered, a prayer scroll is burned, wine is poured, but it lands in a bowl that no one believes will carry it skyward. The air is thick with polite unease. You spot you in the far corner, standing very still, then something happens. As the incense curls around the substitute bowl, it flickers just slightly and then sputters. The smoke twists unnaturally, like it's looking for something that isn't there, a sign maybe, or maybe just a poorly lit draft. But you feel it, that shift in the room, the kind of hush that only arrives when something small goes very wrong in a very old tradition. And then, like a collective shrug, everyone moves on. As if that moment of doubt didn't just happen, only it did. You catch the eyes of a young noblewoman standing near the musicians. She's gripping her sleeve tightly, knuckles white. Her mouth moves just once. A whisper, the bowl guards the words. That's a strange phrase. You file it away. You leave the hall just as the final chime echoes. Outside, the light has changed. A storm is gathering, not overhead yet, but behind the mountains, coiling like a forgotten promise. Historically, we know that omens were everything in the Zhou court. A cracked bowl, a cloud in the wrong shape, a hiccup during a ceremony, these weren't inconveniences. They were warnings. The world spoke, and it was the ruler's job to listen. But what if the message was stolen before it could be delivered? What if the bowl wasn't just a tool, but a kind of key, one that someone wanted to hide or keep or break? That evening, as the wind rises and lanterns sway on trembling cords, a quiet announcement is made. The spring offering will be delayed. The reason is vague. Seasonal considerations. Unseasonal cloud behavior. One scribe even writes supply chain delays. Which is quite bold considering the supply in question is spiritual, but everyone knows what it means. The ritual can't go forward without the bowl. And the longer it stays gone, the more the murmurs grow. Who took it? Why? And more importantly, what happens if it never comes back? You sit outside your quarters that night, wrapped in a wool cloak too thick for the season, watching the clouds roll in. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimes. Once, then again, but this time it sounds like a question. There's something eerie about the Hall of Ancestral Names at night. Not frightening, just crowded in a way that doesn't involve people. You step carefully across its stone floor, your sandals making soft scuffs that echo more than you'd like. Lanterns flicker along the walls, casting long shadows across the engraved wooden tablets lining every side. Each one bears the name of a long-departed royal or noble, written in strokes so delicate they look like someone tried to trap breath inside wood. You're not alone in here. The nobles have gathered, cloaks rustling, voices hushed to whispers barely louder than dust. It's the kind of crowd where no one stands too close, just in case someone decides this is a good time for finger-pointing. Which, given the current climate, seems inevitable. The king sits near the front, posture composed, hands folded calmly in his lap. That same thumb still taps occasionally, betraying the whirlpool behind the mask. Beside him, the high priest pours another cup of wine and places it carefully on a small table. For the ancestors, for form. For the illusion that things are proceeding as planned, but they aren't. The bronze bowl is still missing. A low-ranking noble with impressive eyebrows finally speaks. The gods have noticed, he says quietly, like he's apologizing for the weather. They always notice. That's when the arguing begins, not shouting. This is the Western Zhou dynasty, after all. They argue with furrowed brows and gentle shaming. Perhaps it was misplaced, offers one. Perhaps it walked, mutters another, clearly not helping. You, standing near the exit, says nothing. He's watching you. Meanwhile, the priest continues his wine pouring like he's been training for an invisible marathon. Then someone, somewhere in the room, has the gall to ask the real question. What if it's not coming back? The silence that follows is thick enough to fold. You don't know who took the bowl. Not yet. But you do know this. It's not just about the object. It's about the power vacuum it's creating. And here's a widely accepted historical fact to keep in your pocket. In the Western Zhou period, political legitimacy was deeply tied to ritual correctness. Missing a step in a ceremony, or worse, losing the objects that made those steps possible, wasn't just spiritually embarrassing. It could be interpreted as divine rejection. That's how dynasties crumble. Not in fiery collapse, but in quiet doubts that creep like ivy through the cracks. You lean against one of the carved pillars and study the faces of those around you. Some are angry, some worried. A few look like they're doing mental calculations. How long would it take for a ritual to fail hard enough to justify new leadership? But then something strange happens. The high priest speaks. He doesn't shout, doesn't raise his voice. He simply says, "We will ask again," but not with the bowl. Gasps ripple like someone dropped a chopstick into a pond of very polite panic. The gods don't need bronze, he adds. They need intention. Which is bold, considering that same priest has spent 20 years arguing about incense angles. You notice the king tense ever so slightly. The idea of performing the ritual without the correct vessel isn't just risky. It's a gamble with everything his reign rests on. Still, he nods. And that's when you realize they're not waiting anymore. The ceremony will proceed, improvised or not. That's when your name is spoken, not shouted, not asked, simply placed into the air like a pebble on a pillow. The king is looking at you. You saw the steward yesterday. He says, as if that explains everything. You nod slowly. You'll assist the priest quietly, no announcements. There's a word for this, not honor, not promotion. The word is trap. But you smile politely and accept, because refusing a Zhou king is about as safe as juggling lit incense sticks near your eyebrows. Later, back in your small quarters, you try to sleep. You lie on your mat and listen to the wind rattle the bamboo chimes. The shadows on your wall look too much like script characters rearranging themselves into warnings. And in your dreams, you see a bowl, not missing, not broken, just waiting. Somewhere dark, somewhere quiet, and maybe, just maybe, listening. They hand you a lantern and a scroll and call it preparation. You were hoping for something more in the realm of a plan or guidance or even a good luck chant. But no, just the lantern, small, dented, smelling faintly of waxy cabbage, and a scroll labeled Inventory of ceremonial items, not to be tampered with, comforting. The Hall of Records sits half buried behind the court, low-roofed and cool as a cellar. Inside, it smells like time has been fermenting. Dry reeds, brittle ink, and that familiar hint of mildew that only appears around truths no one has dusted in decades. You're not alone. Assigned to you, probably as a joke, is a scribe named Y. He's short, fast-blinking, and absolutely convinced that every breeze is a ghost looking to audit the kingdom's bookkeeping. "This is all very irregular," he mutters, clutching a ledger like a security blanket. Bowl-related theft is highly frowned upon in the fourth appendix of the Ritual Integrity Scrolls. You nod solemnly. "Do the scrolls offer clues?" He blinks. "Clues? What is this? A drama?" You shrug. "Feels like one." You begin your search beneath the storerooms of records, where hundreds of slatted drawers stretch into the shadows like overachieving termites built them. Some are labeled in charcoal, others in symbols so stylized they resemble birds in mid-conversation. Y pulls a drawer open and sneezes into a sheaf of ancestor tax reports. You start flipping through tallies of wine deliveries, feather quotas, livestock sacrifices, and eventually, bronze. Here's your historical fact. The Western Zhou kept meticulous records, not just about people and land, but about ritual paraphernalia. Bronze vessels had inscriptions, logs, even usage schedules. The bowl would be in here, somewhere. It has to be. You scan a page labeled Vessel Rotation, Third Lunar Sequence. There it is. Ritual Bowl 0147U, high-grade bronze, reserved for spring mandate ceremony. Used annually. Never removed from sacred custody, transported only under escort, but the last entry, it's been crossed out, not erased, crossed. Out next to it, a shaky line of script, under review by stewardship, pending polish. Does that mean you took it? You ask aloud. Y peers over your shoulder. Technically, yes, but also technically, no. Pending polish is a euphemism. For what? Discretion, he whispers. You close the scroll and sigh. Nothing in this place is simple. You turn to go when your lantern's glow flickers across a dusty corner where old items are stored for reassessment. There, half buried under two broken goblets and a suspiciously sticky wooden flute, lies a small red tag. It's silk. Embroidered, torn, but just visible are the characters for Seal of the River Shrine. You frown. Y, noticing your face, grimaces. Oh no, not the river. What's at the river? A shrine, he says, as if that answers everything. And a family of bats, and also, he hesitates. A minor scandal involving a ceremonial ladle, 2 goats, and a monk with no sense of humor. That sounds promising. Here's your quirky detail. One of the more obscure temple records from this era mentions a period when the river shrine temporarily hosted the spring bowl due to ritual overflow. Scholars still argue over whether this was literal flooding or just clerical confusion. Either way, the red silk tag is rare, used only for items considered touched by royalty or divine approval. If this tag ended up here, under miscellaneous junk, it's because someone really wanted it forgotten. You pocket the tag. Y blinks at you. Is this evidence? Let's call it curiosity. You leave the archives feeling slightly more informed, but significantly more unsettled. The wind has picked up again. The clouds are turning in odd directions, slow, like they're considering forming a shape but haven't committed. The river shrine. That's your next step. Outside, someone lights a new lantern near the palace gates. A gong echoes in the far distance, low, wide, sad. You look at the tag in your hand. If this really belonged to the missing bowl, then someone took the time to hide it in the only place no one dares to check without a librarian's permission slip. Back in your room, you sit quietly for a while, letting your thoughts settle like tea leaves in a chipped cup. You're not an investigator. You're not a priest, but now you're both, sort of, and the bowl is out there somewhere, maybe by the river, maybe not. But wherever it is, it's not just bronze anymore, it's becoming a story. The path to the river shrine doesn't look like much at first. Just a dusty ribbon of soil winding between fields of sorghum and millet, dotted with sun-bleached scarecrows and one very aggressive goose who hisses at your ankles the whole way. You pass quiet farmers who nod as you go, their eyes lingering just a second longer than polite. They've heard something. They always do. Maybe they know the bowl is missing. Maybe they just know when someone starts walking toward the river with a purposeful look and a very bad track record of avoiding trouble. The shrine itself appears suddenly, tucked between two gently sloping hills, sheltered beneath a massive mulberry tree that looks older than the concept of weather. It's small, made of stone and crooked wood, with faded red paint flaking off its lintel. A shrine built more for quiet murmurs than processions. You step inside. It's cool, quiet, smells like damp stone and burned mint leaves. There's a raised platform in the center, clearly once used for offerings. And above it, a small niche where something perfectly bowl-shaped used to sit. You trace the indentation with your fingers, still smooth, still sacred. This shrine, as Y mentioned yesterday, has a reputation. Long ago, when the court flooded during an unusually wet spring, rituals were temporarily moved out here, closer to the gods, someone argued. But that closeness came with rumors. Whispers of forgotten rites, of divine presence that was too close. And one fact historians do agree on, this shrine was the only location outside the capital ever allowed to host the mandate bowl. It was temporary, unprecedented, never repeated until now. Outside, the wind picks up. You hear the leaves whispering in the mulberry tree like they're gossiping about you, and then you spot it, half buried beneath the roots of the tree, something shiny. You kneel, gently pushing aside dirt and fallen leaves, not the bowl, but a scrap of red silk. Torn. The second one, now it's a pattern. You follow the trail a little farther along the shrine's outer wall, behind the stone basin, around to the back, where the earth dips sharply toward the river. And there, snagged on a jutting root, is something strange. A length of red thread, tied neatly in a loop, still taut, still deliberate. It leads downward toward the riverbank, where the grass grows taller and more secrets seem to settle. Here's your quirky detail. In some regional customs of the Western Zhou, red silk was used not just for royal seals but also for binding sacred objects during relocation, ritual safety belts, so to speak. They were meant to mark that an object still belonged to the temple, even if temporarily removed. A way to tell the heavens, this isn't theft, just a field trip. So someone tried to justify it, to frame it as official, but they didn't file the scrolls. They didn't notify the priest. Which means this was secret, but not shameful, unless, of course, it failed. As you follow the thread, you hear it before you see it, the sound of water, low and constant, not rushing, just existing. The kind of river that watches you approach without blinking. And then, behind a thicket of reeds, you find it, an empty basket, lined with wool. Large enough for a bronze bowl, still dry, still recently placed. The basket sits on a small rise above the waterline, carefully hidden but not buried. It feels more like a pause than a discard. Like someone planned to come back, you crouch beside it. The grass is flattened nearby. Someone waited here, not long ago, maybe even during the ceremony, and that's when the wind shifts. You smell incense. Faint, familiar, you're not alone. You turn slowly, nothing, just reeds and river. But something about the air feels watched. You rise and look out across the water. The reflection of clouds ripples. The mulberry tree leans slightly to the left, and suddenly this doesn't feel like a quest for a bowl anymore. It feels like a test. Back at the shrine, you sit on the steps, letting your breathing slow. That's when the old caretaker arrives. Silent as morning, carrying a broom made of bundled twigs and wisdom. He doesn't greet you. He just nods, then says, "You're not the first to look for it here." You wait. He continues sweeping. They always return, but not always in the same hands. And just like that, he disappears around the corner, sweeping leaves that weren't there until he arrived. Historians still debate whether that bowl was ever truly lost during this period. Some say it was hidden deliberately during a succession dispute. Others think it simply cracked and no one wanted to admit it to the king. But in the moment, under that ancient tree, you realize something simpler. Whoever took it cared deeply, which means they weren't trying to destroy the dynasty. They were trying to protect something inside it. You return from the shrine with your tunic damp at the hem and a red thread wound carefully around your fingers like a quiet promise. The sky has shifted, no longer brooding, but sulking. Gray clouds hang low like overripe fruit, and the whole court feels like it's holding its breath. They've assigned you a new task, archiving, because when you wander too close to the truth, someone inevitably decides to put you in a room with no windows and a lot of clay. You're led down a narrow staircase into a small, cool chamber where the oracle bones are stored. This is the part of the palace where words outlive the people who said them. The shelves are stacked with plastrons, turtle shells, each one marked with careful divinations. Questions carved into the bone, cracks from fire-heated rods. Answers, or at least something that once passed for them, now long set, your job, organize them by what? No one says. Chronology, subject, crack angle. You stand in the glow of 2 guttering candles, holding a turtle shell in your hands, and you feel underqualified. The diviner isn't here. No one is, just you, a writing brush, a wax tablet, and about 100 questions, none of which are yours. You begin slowly, brushing soot from the shell's surface, peering at the characters carved into it. Will the spring flood come early? You read it aloud, softly. The lines are elegant, like someone was trying to impress the spirit realm with penmanship. Below the question is the crack, clean, curved, like a laugh that didn't quite finish, and next to that the answer. Signs unclear. You snort. Of course they are. Here's your historical anchor. Oracle bone divination was a standard ritual during the Shang and early Zhou dynasties. While the elite recorded dreams and omens, the more official decisions, military campaigns, crop planting, royal births, were carved, heated, and cracked. But what few people talk about is what happened after the cracking. The filing, someone, likely underpaid and definitely overdusted, had to label, shelve, and remember every single question asked of heaven. You, right now, are living that person's life. You place the first shell in the flood stack. It's a short stack, comforting, then you move to the next. Is the west border stable? Cracked, answer, some movement. Vague, unhelpful, classic, next. Has the ancestor accepted the wine? Crack, sharp and messy, answer, scent remains. Which sounds like a passive-aggressive spirit if you've ever read one. You go on like this, fingers smudged with soot and wax, breathing in the scent of old ceremonies. You start to recognize patterns. Certain scribes liked straight lines, some carved like they were angry. One had an odd habit of ending all questions with a tiny spiral, like a flourish. And then, tucked behind a clay vessel used for storing binding twine, you find something different, not a turtle shell. A scrap of parchment folded many times over, sealed with wax broken now. Inside is a list. Not prayers, inventory, dates, times, movement logs for ceremonial items. And there it is, spring bowl transferred from Hall of Names to temporary custody. Seal bearer, unknown. No signature, no royal stamp, no official authorization, just the word unknown. Written in a hand that tries to look confident, but trembles near the end, you lean back and exhale. This isn't theft. This is bureaucracy at its most cowardly. Someone moved the bowl. Quietly. Perhaps out of fear or reverence or their own belief that the current court couldn't use it properly. The motives are unclear, but the bowl is part of this web now. A crack in the system, not just the shell. You place the parchment in your sash and return to cataloging bones, feeling their weight differently now. Each one is a question that was once urgent, a breath held. A decision deferred to smoke and spirit, and you wonder, if you cracked a bone now, would it tell you where the bowl is? Or just ask another question. Here's a lesser-known fact. Some diviners reportedly burned more bones than needed, not for clarity, but out of anxiety. A kind of spiritual micromanaging. The gods don't give second opinions, but humans try to extract them anyway. Your hands move faster now. You're in rhythm. You group by subject, carve fresh labels with dry wit. Whether woes, mild paranoia, marriage disasters, animal involved. You find a sense of calm here. The ancestors were warriors too. Somehow that's soothing. Outside, the wind hums again, rattling the old wooden beams. The bones don't move, but you swear the room gets quieter, as if the questions know something has changed. As if the ancestors are listening more closely now, you whisper without thinking. Do you want the bowl back? And just for a moment, you think you hear a crack. It's dark when you leave the archive room. Lanterns along the corridor flicker like they're gossiping. casting twitchy shadows that make the palace feel hollow. You're not supposed to be out this late, but tonight, the rules seem less pressing than the silence. They've asked you to perform one final reading, you alone, no priest, no diviner. Just you, a small crowd of watchful nobles, and a cracked plastron still warm from the fire. The setup is simple, ceremonial, terrifying. You kneel before the fire bowl in the central courtyard. Rain threatens in the sky but hasn't committed. The clouds hang low and wet, like they're eavesdropping. Someone, likely the high priest, has already inscribed the question into the bone. Will the river breach before the fifth moon? It's the same question that's been asked a dozen different ways this week, because the truth is, the river's been rising, quietly, relentlessly. And no one has the nerve to say it aloud unless the gods do first. The fire burns hot, dry, impatient. You lift the bone, its surface pale and smooth, carved with a hand steadier than yours. You lower it onto the brazier. Slowly. The heat crawls up your fingers, then comes the crack, loud, sharp, like a stone splitting a mirror. You try not to flinch. And now, the part you've never done alone before, the reading. The bone has split cleanly with two distinct lines. One curves left, graceful. The other juts sharply, angling like it's trying to escape. The nobles lean in. You're aware of every breath behind you. You stare at the cracks, willing them to say something useful, and then you say the words. It comes before the fifth moon. There's a ripple, not gasps, just stillness. You don't know how you know. The cracks could mean anything, but your voice says it like it's a certainty. And now it is. The king, seated at the edge of the courtyard beneath an awning of silk, exhales slowly. A servant rushes off, probably to fetch sandbags or scrolls or excuses. And that's when you realize, this reading wasn't ceremonial, it was a decision-making tool. They were waiting on you. You just gave them permission to panic. Here's your historical truth. Oracle readings weren't always about belief. Sometimes they were about consensus, about choosing a course of action and needing divine cover to do it. Once the gods spoke, no one could argue. And here's a lesser-known wrinkle. There were people in every court who influenced the readings, not by force but by tone, timing, and suggestion. A well-timed hesitation could be worth 10 fires. You look down at the bone. It looks back in its silent way, and now the villagers will act. Because the bowl may be missing, but the sky isn't waiting. The river isn't either. You hand the plastron to the archivist, who receives it like a precious egg. She wraps it in linen and adds it to a fresh clay box marked with today's date and your name, on a prophecy. You walk through the palace as people begin to move. Quiet orders are given. Lanterns are lit, storage rooms unlocked. Buckets, tools, scrolls, everyone has a task now. You pass you by the outer gate. He's standing alone, sleeves loose, looking toward the hills where the river curls like a sleeping snake. He speaks without turning. I heard your voice, you wait. You did well, he says then, after a pause. Don't get used to it. You smile. That's probably the nicest thing he's said all week. Back in your quarters, you sit on your mat and listen to the rising wind. There's no rain yet, but it's close. The kind of air that promises a decision. The red silk tag still rests in your pocket. You take it out and lay it on the table beside a chipped cup. And in that moment, you wonder, what if the bowl was hidden not out of fear, but to protect this very choice, to force the court to act on faith? Historians still debate whether the spring bowl ever truly controlled policy, or if it was just a beautifully carved excuse. Tonight, you made a call without it, and that may have changed everything. The bowl is back, not with fanfare, not with horns or heralds or dramatically unrolled scrolls, just there. One morning, sitting quietly atop its pedestal in the Hall of Names like it never left, not polished, not cracked, just a little dusty around the base, you notice it first. Mostly because the hall was supposed to be closed for weatherproofing. Also because you weren't expecting the sunlight to catch on bronze like that, soft and gold, like a sigh turned physical. There are no guards posted, no notes, no nervous steward lingering nearby with sleeve-gnawing guilt. Just the bowl, returned, you step toward it slowly. There's still incense in the air from the daily rites. It curls in the beams of morning light like threads of thought you forgot to finish. The bowl is warm to the touch, And yes, it's the same one, you'd know it anywhere. The same delicate spiral along the inner rim, the same 3 dents along the base from when someone, probably you, tripped during the cold festival of year unspoken. But it feels different now, as if returning has changed it, or maybe changed you. You stand there a long time, unsure whether to bow or joke or simply nod like you're greeting a cousin you once stole rice from. Eventually, you bow, not deeply. Just enough, later that day, no one mentions it, not at court, not in the scroll rooms. Not even in the kitchen, where gossip flows faster than soup. It's as if the bowl never left. As if the ceremony continued without interruption, the skies obeyed, and the river knew its place. But you know better. Here's your closing fact. Many sacred objects in Zhou times were returned quietly after political tensions eased. They weren't always lost. Sometimes they were borrowed, hidden, or withheld, not as rebellion, but as a whisper of protest, a way to say, this system isn't working. Without tearing it down, you suspect that's what happened here, and the one who took it, still silent, still anonymous. And maybe that's the point. Because now, even with the bowl back in place, the air has shifted. The priest is more precise than before. The nobles nod longer before they speak. And you've stopped asking for permission to understand things. That night, you find yourself back at the river shrine, not because you have to be, just because something about the wind feels familiar. The mulberry tree rustles overhead, shaking off the last of the day's light. The shrine glows faintly with moonlight reflected off the river. You sit on the stone step and listen. There's no voice, no vision, just the memory of the bowl's absence and everything that filled its place. Questions, hesitation, discovery. You reach into your sleeve and pull out the red silk thread. You tie it gently around one of the shrine's beams, not tightly, not with any ceremony. Just a quiet loop, a marker. A reminder that something real happened here. The bowl may have returned, but the questions it stirred. They're still echoing, and that's the heart of it, isn't it? Sometimes it's not the object that holds power. It's the moment when it's missing, the space it leaves behind, the stories people whisper to explain it, the fear, the wonder. The chance to act without a sign and realize you could all along. You lie down in the grass, head tilted toward the stars now pinpricking the sky. The river murmurs beside you, endless and patient. Your role in all this is done. But you know you'll dream of bronze and fire, and the sound a plastron makes when it cracks just right. Because those questions don't leave, they linger like incense, like mist, like the faintest ripple in the water long after the stone has settled. Now there's nothing more to find. The river has quieted. The bowl rests where it belongs or where people need it to be. And the questions, well, they can wait until morning. Let yourself drift now. Imagine the stone floor cooling beneath your feet, the scent of mulberry leaves still sweet in the air. The candlelight fades gently across the walls, casting soft gold patterns that stretch like silk across the parchment of your mind. You're no longer the helper or the watcher. You're simply someone lying beneath the stars of a time long gone. Let the sounds melt of wind brushing the shrine roof, of distant sandals on clay, of a king breathing easier tonight because the bowl has come home. Let your thoughts settle like dust in the archive. Let the questions fade like the last curls of smoke from a forgotten ritual fire. You've done enough. You've listened. You've wondered. You've walked the slow path from ceremony to choice and back again. Now your breath can slow too. No need to hold the story anymore. It will keep itself. Let the air around you soften. Let your body relax into the rhythm of a world that, for all its riddles and rituals, still follows the same sun, the same moon, the same slow tide of time. Feel your eyelids grow heavy, your chest rise and fall like the river in its calmest seasons. There's nothing more to solve tonight, nothing more to carry, only the peace that comes when the bowl has returned and you, too, are finally home. End of script. Sweet dreams.